All right, so here we are, ready to get rolling, I think, with our reduced tillage vegetable production web series week 3 installation. Okay, thanks everybody for joining us here. We are super excited this week to be visiting Jon Yagla at his farm in Iowa City. Jon is accompanied by Mark Quee, who is the farm manager at Scattergood Friends School Farm at West Branch, very nearby. And they are both very experienced farmers who have been working with no-till vegetable production for some time. Our no-till vegetable production web series has been really fun this summer. We're learning a lot about different ways and different approaches that different farms have taken with the no-till vegetable production methods that they have. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but let me introduce myself. Let me back up and introduce myself a little bit. My name is Jacqueline Venner-Sensky, and I'm the horticulture coordinator at Practical Farmers of Iowa. I am joined behind the scenes here at the PFI office by Jorgen Rose. He is going to be doing some technical support for me today. As I said, we are here with Jon Yagla of the Millet Seed and Mark Quee of Scattergood Friends School Farm, and we are going to be talking with them over the next hour. We're going to be tagging along as Mark kind of asks a lot of questions of Jon, and I help to field some questions from the audience. So can you flip to the next slide for me, Jorgen? Okay. So before we get started, let me take care of a little bit of housekeeping, and I can talk a little bit about the organization. So Practical Farmers of Iowa is a nonprofit organization. We're based in Ames, Iowa, and we were started in 1985 by farmers. We have a sort of by farmers for farmers model here that is very based on farmer to farmer knowledge sharing, and we do a lot of farmer to farmer or farmer led research. And our mission at Practical Farmers of Iowa is to equip farmers to build resilient farms and communities. Everybody is welcome at PFI. We're a Big Tent organization, and we like producers of all kinds. We have members who run the gamut from row crop production to livestock to specialty crops and nuts and berries and flowers and all kinds of things. Those are the things that I get to work with as the horticulture coordinator. And we invite everybody to come to our organization and access our vast collection of resources that we have available on our website at practicalfarmers.org. Next slide, please. So the event today, like I said, is part of our 4-part series. This is week 3. And the first week we spoke with Rujinder and Claire Strader from the University of Wisconsin about their research up at the University of Wisconsin. And week 2, we spoke with Dylan Bruce of Circadian Organics, and he spoke about the cover crop based reduced tillage practices that he has there. And today, as I said, we're going to be talking with Mark and Jon about the mulch-based no-till practices at the Millet Seed. We have one more installation in the series after today. Next Thursday from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock, we'll be talking about on-farm research and practices with some additional farmers. We're going to be talking with Hannah Breckbill and Emily Fagan at Humble Hands Harvest, and I think also, and we'll talk more about that next week. Okay. Let's see, we hope you can join them for all of us, and you can always find the recordings later on our YouTube page. All right, next slide, please. So in addition to the web series, of course, PFI has lots of other summer events that give a great platform for our farmer to farmer learning. We have a number of other in-person events coming up, and you can learn more on our website. I think the next horticulture focused event is going to be September 8th at Red Fern Farm. We have a catching up event on that day. Okay, next slide. So if you have questions as we go through, you can use the chat function. You can pop your questions right into the chat, and I will go ahead and feed those to our speakers. And we may also pop in other links as we go and as appropriate. All right. Let's see, we're going to go until about 5 o'clock here. And if you have any questions, like I said, pop them in the chat. I'm just reading through my script here to make sure I have everything. Okay, so with that, we can end our slide presentation until later, and we'll hand it over to Jon and Mark.
Gotta make sure.
I'm Mark. I am John. And it's a hot, sweltery, little bit of hazy day in Iowa, but this is one of my favorite places to be. I just love what John does. We're in the heart of Iowa City, and he has an urban farm, and I'm just so distracted by all the wonderful things that are happening. So we're going to talk a lot about his no-till methods, and particularly the mulching that he does to make that happen. But just know that we're going to get distracted by other things and talk about that too, because there's just so much wonderful stuff going on. And where are we now?
Right now we're in my backyard here at the Millet Seed farm, 911 South 7th Avenue in Iowa City. It's a dead end street where I grew up. My dad is holding the phone filming us, and my folks live just 3 houses down. So I didn't make it very far from the nest. I went and explored a little bit, and then I came back. So it's a great neighborhood to be running a farm like this from a community and neighbor standpoint, and also just from a soil standpoint. We have really nice soil. There's a creek that wraps around here, so we're in a low spot, and that also brings all kinds of challenges. But yeah, so this is one of 3 plots that I garden on. I do all no-till, no machines. I use hand tools only, and pretty much everything from scratch. When I started the farm, this is my, according to PFI records, this is my 6th year growing vegetables for market through a CSA. And I do that on a little less than 1/5 of an acre. My backyard, 2 neighbors, and my parents' front yard are the plots that I have. I used to have an offsite garden that I called the hut down by the river. That one actually I tilled up with a tiller because it was actually a larger plot. It was probably twice the size of my biggest plot in town. But I've gone away from that, deciding it was too much to manage and thinking that I could still grow what I needed to on the small space here in town.
I'm a little surprised to hear you say that the soil is really good here, because I wouldn't expect that. You know, like the history of this, like were people gardening here, or was it just lawn?
Yeah, so they're across the street where we'll go to eventually. I've heard, these are rumors, I guess I don't know for certain, but that there was a truck farm operating out of this area. There's a tiny house our neighbor Martha owns that used to be an original farmhouse, and it's small. It's like 600, maybe even like 400 square feet originally, and I think it was a farmhouse. 8 kids lived there.
Okay. I shouldn't be surprised that this used to be the edge of town.
Yeah, so
but now it's not. You know.
No, now it's in the middle of town. It was the edge at a certain point. So, I mean, yeah, we have really good soil to begin with. It's nice and dark and loamy. I'm not exactly sure the soil type. I need to look into that again. I tend to not spend too much time like geeking out on the specific soil science stuff. But it would be interesting to know, because it is really nice if we have good moisture. If it gets dry, it's just like concrete, and it can be really problematic. Though over the years doing no-till, adding lots of mulch and organic matter, it is improving significantly.
So speaking of rain, when was your last rain?
Well, I don't remember the last rain.
Like significant, measurable.
Yeah,
something that actually helped.
It's been probably, it was the end of June. It was like 5 weeks ago or so.
Yeah, I farm just 15 miles east of here, and we're on week 5 with no rain.
Yeah, it's been really challenging with moisture this year. It was getting really dry. Was it May that was super dry? And then all of a sudden we got a rain just in time. It was maybe even a week or 10 days of like gentle rains, and it brought us to a good point. We got to float for a little bit, but we haven't really seen any rain since then. There's been storms that come and part around us. We're hanging in there, but the plants they're going to be looking a little sad today, especially during the middle of the day, the hot time.
Well, what I've seen is beautiful. So
thank you.
Yeah. So what people need to know is that we're in town, and it's really dry, and this is John's farm. So let's what are you going to show us here?
Well, I was going to show you the greenhouse. This is where I have a lot of fun, and I've got my tomatoes this year. I'm growing them on cow panels. I've taken the plastic off in the summer. I've decided that I didn't like growing under plastic in such a small tunnel. I cover it back up for winter for greens production. And then we've got all my starts and a lot of tree seedlings, which is one of my passions that I'm trying to move towards eventually more, is like this tree propagation. We got a curry tree right here. We've got some ginger. I've got a bunch of fig trees in the ground. Here's a fig.
Are these little curry suckers down here?
They are.
I may need to.
Yeah.
I may need to buy one of those.
Yeah, I'm gonna dig it up soon and have some babies. So I'll
Okay.
let you know. When
All
I
right,
do.
awesome. I got first dibs, folks.
All right. And we've got some Iowa peaches here. These are Nanking cherries. I like to propagate trees that are relatively easy to grow from seed or cutting or divisions. I had, yeah, so these are part of, these beds in here are permanent beds. This table that we're looking at with all the starts on it is on top of the bed. And usually I don't do this, but this year I just decided to leave it up all year, and it was definitely worth it. Here are some of my last starts. I grow in wind strips. I do a lot from transplant. That helps with the no-till and with managing weeds, because I get a lot of time in the flat, usually about 20 to 30 days. And that's time to either let a crop go in the bed a little bit longer or to get the weeds under control before I put the plants in. This is lettuce, cilantro, fennel, kohlrabi. And then I've got some persimmon trees here, some hazelnuts. Nice. So yeah. Wow.
And looking at some of the beds, so the beds are on the side primarily. Do you have one down? It looks like
Yeah,
you have
so
sweet. You have sweet potatoes here.
Yeah,
looks
I
like.
threw a sweet potato slip in there.
Okay.
So yeah, there's 3 beds under this tunnel. We're in the paths. There's one in the middle,
Gotcha.
which reminds me of an important part of my no-till system is permanent beds and permanent paths. The sizing is not that important. If I did it all over again, I would probably have wider paths, but I am space limited. So it's the type of thing where maximize bed space, but having wide paths is good. Everything's kind of set up on in theory, 4-foot bed, 1-foot path. But as the years have gone on, I really only plant in a 30-inch bed top. So I have a little more space on the paths, but I try to just stay walking in the center of paths. So these beds with the figs growing out, there's some basil down here, tomatoes. These are really, I've added a lot of homemade compost on these. And these beds see a lot of activity throughout the season. They're planted pretty much all year round.
But it's a mix of perennials and annuals.
It is at this one in particular.
Okay.
And this is the first year I'm experimenting with figs in the ground.
So they haven't wintered over yet.
No, sorry, they did overwinter.
They did.
I planted them last year. They all overwintered with the plastic cover.
Okay.
And there's not really any fruit production on them this year, but next year, hopefully they will. You can these are Chicago hardy figs. You can cut them to the ground or they'll just naturally die back, usually in the winter. And their roots stay alive, and they fruit on 1-year wood. So in theory, you can get good crops off of figs that are grown in the ground that die back, mulch them really well. There's actually a few figs on this one. I don't know if you can see them here, but
then between the figs, you've tucked in some basil, you have the tomatoes.
Yep.
So you're really integrating the perennial and annual crops here.
Yeah, there's a center row of figs, and then on the outside row, I did basil. I have problems with downy mildew, and I'm doing a PFI trial to compare different varieties. And on my own, in addition, I bought 8 new varieties of basil to try and see. And actually, this one right here, and unfortunately, I'm not sure if it's Chinese sweet or what the name of this basil is, but this is the only one that didn't get downy mildew of the 8 new varieties I tried.
Oh my gosh.
So
It's good information.
Hey, quick question there, John. What I mean, figs are something that grows, you think of growing in warmer areas.
Correct.
And I have heard it coming up in recent discussions in some of our PFI field days, how people are adjusting to things like climate change and like pushing the boundaries of what they can grow in their USDA hardiness zone. What is the hardiness zone in Iowa City where you are?
We're 5. Is it is B warmer or?
Yeah, so you'd be
A.
like a 5B.
I think so. I'm not sure. It's Iowa City is like way. What are you saying?
I think you're warmer than we are. Like we're
I'm definitely warmer than
Yeah.
West Branch. Like
yeah.
the city effect is insane.
I was
gonna say, you
all
might-
the concrete, electricity.
And just the winds are so much less. I think the winds really, hurt things.
You might have kind of a microclimate there in town.
Yeah, there's definitely a microclimate. But these figs are pretty hardy. I mean, going up north, I would be a little concerned. But it's worth trying them.
Yeah.
Especially with climate change. I mean, you just don't know. And if you have the right snow cover or you have a lot of mulch to put on, I think the roots can survive. And I'm really interested in just fun tropical things that I like to eat. I'm really into growing ginger and turmeric. I played around with taro root a little bit. So
That's great.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is there more to see in here? Should we step out?
we could step out into the garden.
I assume I'm out on an aisle here.
Yeah, where that goes is.
Don't want to mess that up. All right. So tell us what we have going on here. Again, I see some perennials. I see some
Yeah.
annuals,
Yeah,
some biennials.
I had this wacky idea this spring that I wanted to mix perennial herbs with annual herbs or greens, thinking that having permanent living roots in the ground is healthier for the soil. And so I thought I'd do a single row. Here we have sorrel, a single row that in theory will come back every year. And then I have parsley on either edge of it, and the parsley's on the drip line. So once sorrel's established, you don't really need to irrigate it usually in Iowa. I mean, we're getting into a pretty intense dry space where everything would like a drink. I try to avoid watering if possible. I do put water on. I have drip lines for emergency waterings and for anything that I know I want for the CSA. I make sure to give it plenty of water.
Steve, can I get you to go ahead and zoom in on some of kind of zero in on some of those planting rows there while John's talking?
All right.
You can.
Thank you.
If you need.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and honestly, I probably won't go forward with this idea in the long run, because I think management will be challenging as the seed stocks flop over into the parsley. I've cleaned it up a little bit, and I think for me, rather than having a single row of perennial mixed with annuals, I'll have like one of my beds dedicated to perennials with 3 rows in it, and then have a few annuals next to it. That's kind of we're getting into some of the long-term visions of where the farm might head into the future, as I hope to put more beds into perennial production.
That sounds
half.
good. And
you
before
tell
we
us-
move away from your greenhouse, John, there is a question from a viewer about curious about the footprint of the greenhouse. What's the size of it?
It's 25 feet by 12 or 13, and it's about, I think it's about 7 feet tall.
Excellent.
It's just a homemade caterpillar tunnel.
Okay. Great. Sounds good. Go on. Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit? So this spring, you're putting the parsley in here. Like, what did this bed look like? You already had the sorrel in place, or,
No, so this year, what did it look like in the spring? Off the top of my head, I don't remember what was here in the spring. I think it was probably just mulched with leaves this spring. There had been some crop that had winter killed here, and I'd put mulch on it. This was the first year for sorrel. I did this all from seed. I started them in flats and transplanted them out. Same with the parsley.
Okay. And so what was the bed like to work? Like, are you out here with a trowel, or like, what do you use? Like, what does your planting look like?
Yeah, so I'm trying to move towards the rake on, rake off method. Wait,
You gotta
rake
tell-
off, rake on. You know that Karate Kid thing?
You got to explain that.
Yeah, so basically I come out here in the spring, there's mulch on it or debris, and I rake it off of the bed into the aisles, and I have bare soil. And now I used to use a bed preparation rake with row markers to mark my rows, but I've gotten away from that, and it's simply I just tension my drip lines, and I've got them all spaced at the right way, and I make a furrow on either side of the drip line with a diamond hoe, which I can show you. I'll show you a couple of my favorite tools. And if we have time, I can do a quick demo. I did get a bed ready to transplant cilantro. I don't know if we'll have time to get to it, but and if the like these beds that I'm not walking in, and they were good to start with. I've been adding organic matter primarily in the form of leaf mulch, which I get from the city, which is my main mulch supply, and I would also say it's my main fertility supply. I rake that away, and if it's got good moisture, it's really fluffy, and I can run this diamond hoe through it, and then I just plug them in by hand.
Is that just like ground up leaves, or is it like composted?
It's
Like, does it look like compost, or does it
It
look
does
like
not
leaves?
look like compost.
Okay.
It looks like leaves, partially shredded. They go around the city with a leaf vacuum, and they get partially shredded in the process. Some of it comes out really matted. Some of it comes out nice. Kind of depends on how dry it is, what type of leaves it is. I asked them to avoid walnut leaves, juglone. I actually have a walnut tree right behind Mark and my dad, which the beds we're standing in are actually affected by the roots of that. I found walnut roots in this. So I can't grow tomatoes or peppers or eggplants in this section of the garden. And I've actually have another whole section I can't grow anything in. But it's fine. We work around it.
And will they just drop off a load for you, or do you have
They
to?
drop a load in my driveway. It's a huge resource as far as material and cost saving. I have thought about it, and I would, if I was in the country, I would still think it's totally worth it to purchase leaves or straw and do the same type of mulching system, even if I had to buy it. But I bet I save $1 to $2 grand a year by just getting free mulch delivered to me.
And they may be happy just to have someplace to dump it. too.
Yeah, they're really happy to
yeah.
drop it here. It saves them a trip to the landfill, and
Sure.
they have a pile that's just sitting out there waiting to go into their compost.
Nice. And that's true on all your various plots, the different fields around.
They all receive leaves, but now at this point, I mean, one year they got stuck trying to drop it in one of our fields. So the only place they'll drop it now is in the driveway. So my dad and I hauled leaves to the different sites.
Yeah.
And I only do one load a year now, but it fills up my entire driveway. I used to be getting 2 or 3 of them a year.
And the neighbors are fine.
Yeah. Having good neighbors is one of the most important things that allows this to work in town.
And they know you. You grew up here.
Yeah.
Is there more to see here, or should we head to the
We can start
corner?
walking to the other plot. I'll grab my tools quick.
Grab what?
Should I grab my tools quick?
Sure, we might. Might be a little.
It's really fun to get a little insight into what's going on in your urban farm there, Jon, and it's pretty amazing to see how much you're able to produce.
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
I was just saying, it's really fun to see as the camera kind of pans around, it's really fun to see, to get a little insight into your urban farm and to see how much
Yeah.
you're able to produce on that area.
Thanks.
You haven't seen anything yet.
I was just going to show you this quick. This is my diamond hoe, and this is the main tool I use for cultivation and for furrowing. And This is my favorite rake. It's just a collapsible rake that I could change the size.
Oh, nice.
And these are the main two tools I use now. I occasionally, if it's really hard, I'll use this hook to make the holes a little better after going through with that diamond hoe. But I try to avoid that because it's really, you want to be able to just keep the flow going and have loose soil for transplanting. So I'll water the beds really well before I plant them if it's this dry, just to make it easier to work. Smart. That's one thing I do. The night before, I give it a really good watering.
And then do you see weed pressure after you plant it, or you're bringing the mulch back over your transplants?
Yeah, so I usually don't see significant weed pressure, depending on what it is. I can get into, I'll show you the different types of transplant I do. I would say dense transplanting like lettuce, cilantro, onions, garlic leeks. I don't have a whole lot of weed pressure other than with like onions. I have to come in and weed those. But like lettuce, cilantro, it canopies out and I harvest it before I have a weed issue. And then I can just cultivate it at that point. Yeah, let's go look at it. Let's do it.
That seems like a lot of firewood. Do you have a wood burning fireplace?
Yeah, we do.
Nice.
Quick stop in the front yard.
Yeah. So this is the front yard.
Wow.
We've been trying to grow more flowers, and the zinnias are suffering from the dryness. They haven't really gotten any water from me personally or the sky.
They look great.
But then we've got some sochan in the front, which is a native edible sunflower. It's in the rutabaga family. That thing spreads like crazy, but it's really not a problem. I've got some beans some different bean varieties that I'm trying for home use, dry beans, and then here we've got a basil variety trial for downy mildew pressure.
Very good.
Any insights you want to share on your downy mildew? You said everything except for that one variety that you're not sure what it is.
Yeah, so as far as I have a lot of problems with downy mildew here on the farm because we're in such a low spot and whatever else. But these are the Italian types. I did Genovese, Devotion, and Prospera. The last two are a downy mildew resistant variety. And of those three, Prospera is the only one that didn't get downy mildew for me personally.
That's true at our farm too.
Cool. Yeah. It's exciting though to have that variety available. I'm going to be able to grow basil now. Potentially.
Well, this may not be fair to ask. Do you think that all this mulching, organic matter, like, do you think that that has any influence on the downy mildew, or is that you're just going to choose to believe that that's not?
I'm going to choose to believe. I don't know the answer there. I mean, I think that I'm not here to say that no-till solves all of our problems. It's a way of farming that I personally think produces less harm to soil life, and can be a way to reduce labor in the system and be a much more pleasant way of farming.
Yeah,
but,
I have no basis in.
Yeah,
it seems too that you'd have less splashing and stuff too without all that loose soil.
Potentially.
So it's like the soil should stay on the ground.
Yeah,
off the plants more. So yeah, who knows?
Yeah, but I have my fair share of disease issues, fungal issues, etc.
You can kind of see like we are kind of sloping down here a little bit.
Yeah, we've had floods and the creek will come up to this intersection in front of us. I mean, it's happened at least 4 times in my lifetime.
You find that you're foggy here and then just drive out of it quickly?
I haven't noticed that. I can't say for sure. But yeah, so let's go down this row here. You got some anise hyssop for the pollinator, and it's tasty. Here's a good example of, I don't know if you can see through the Protect net. I'll lift it up quick. But
don't let the flea beetles in.
This is my spicy mix, and this is an example of direct seeded crops. I hand seed everything. I make the furrows pretty much the same way as I do for transplanting. I do have another tool that I use for that I hope I get to show you. It's amazing. It's actually just a regular furrow maker.
So here the leaf mulch is really identifiably leaf mulch.
Yep.
So is that from this spring? Like it just hasn't broken down yet, or did you apply it before you did this planting? Or?
Yeah, so this was, I'm struggling to remember what was in this plot before. It might have been lettuce. I cleared the bed and I did. Yeah, we have a pile of leaf mulch. I used to put everything on the beds, but now we just make a big pile. And I brought it over here. And after direct seeding, I always sprinkle a thin layer of mulch over the top after watering it. And it's not really a weed suppression, but it is soil moisture conservation and keeping the soil temps a little cooler. You know, I'm relatively thin layer, probably not more than a ½ inch. So I don't, you know, I bring out like 1 tote of leaves, maybe 2 at most.
So this is more to aid the germination than it is to keep the soil, you know, workable or.
Exactly. It's more of just the soil germination. So
in the spring, do you put in like on inch, like how deep do you put it on?
For direct seeding, I always use the same amount of mulch, and I pretty much direct seed only the spicy salad mix, lettuce mix, things that are really quick to germinate. I don't weed them. So I basically try and choose beds that have been clean. They've maybe had, I just know going into the winter, they didn't have a lot of weed seeds for my early successions. That's the goal. So I've kind of gone away from like a traditional rotation where you're just looking at what crop family, and I've gone more towards like, is this bed suitable to the crop that's going to go there? Make sure that it's not the same crop that was there before, especially if it had some disease pressure or something.
Yeah, I don't see any weeds here.
No, this is yeah. And, you know, if we walk down here I'm experimenting with peanuts. I've got protection on peanuts, trying to keep the deer off of them. Here's a more mature spicy mix. It's actually looking a little unhealthy right now. It looked great a week or 2 ago, but again, not really any weeds. And this was garlic before I planted the spicy mix.
Yeah, I think I think that's the bed that you showed me in the spring, John, and that's fun to see, like how that turns over. How many times in a season would you say you turn over your beds?
It really varies. At most, I'd have 3 crops in a bed, and some only have 1.
Sure.
It kind of varies. Here I was experimenting with transplanting dill in clumps like I do cilantro, and it worked pretty well.
And again, no weeds. Like this hasn't been weeded?
No, I haven't weeded this at all. This actually, so this had garlic in it last fall, and it was relatively heavy leaf mulch and some compost. And then we didn't weed it at all during this growing season. We harvested the garlic, pulled some weeds, and within a week or 2, this lettuce was transplanted into there and the dill. Yeah. And this Protect net is to keep the deer off. We have really heavy deer pressure. They actually sleep back here behind these elderberries and pawpaws.
So it seems like with that Protect net, you just have those little hoops to sort of guide it. How far apart would you say you space those?
Anywhere from every 8 feet. Yeah, 8 feet to 12 feet. And then I also do floating as well.
Oh, very good.
Like I'm floating it on the lettuce and these black-eyed peas over here. I did the hoops on the spicy mix just, I don't know if it was because I like the way it looks or because the flea beetles will actually nibble on the edges of leaves. if it's floating. So that's
Wow.
another. Yeah, I found them. It depends on the pressure of flea beetles in the year, but I've seen them like hanging out just on the outside of the Protect net, just eating the leaves.
I've
I'll
heard
put
this
a
has
little
been a
plug in.
pretty,
September
Sorry, go
15th,
ahead.
we're going to be hosting a field day out at Scattergood, and Ajay Nair will be there, and we're doing a Protect Net trial on butternut squash. So Ajay knows a lot about it, so he'll be there if you want to learn more. Come
you
to
said that was
Scattergood.
September 15th, right?
Yep, September 15th,
Very good.
4 p.m. Yep. It's a cool product. Yeah, the squash bugs don't think so, though.
Yeah. So there's a couple experiments going on, which is something I like to do in this. This is a cilantro planting that I did the transplant. One thing I should mention that to make things easier, and I kind of picked this up from the Lean Farm book by Ben Hartman, of just finding some pretty similar plant spacing and sticking to it. I do cilantro and lettuce at the same, and I do bunches of cilantro, and I got 3 cuttings of cilantro off this, which is amazing. It's pretty rare to have that happen. And then I planted delicata in there. And it's just kind of, you can see the old cilantro growing through it and the delicata growing up all over it. Seems to be doing well.
In your experience, will those weed-free beds be the same next year? Like once you get them clean, do they stay clean for the most part?
They do to some extent, but because I've kind of decided to not weed as much, there just always seems to be some weeds around, and I've decided that I like that, and I don't want. I used to struggle to try and keep everything really clean and keep things from going to seed, and I've found that I enjoy farming much better if I let things grow and not worry about the weed seeds, because they're gonna float. Some weed seeds are gonna float in. If we stop managing the garden, it will return to nature on its own. And so I try to embrace that and see weeds and weed seeds as a sign of hope that when I'm not doing this anymore, it's going to be taken care of. I'll show you quick. We'll go back here and I'll just show you an example. And I might, just clarify, I might 2 years from now be like, oh, this was a disaster. But this is where I'm at right now. If you look down this bed, this had Napa cabbage in it. And I was really into winter kill cover crops as part of my fertility and mulch management. And I still am, but the middle of the summer was dry. And I was like, I'm not trying to establish cover crops while it's this dry. So I just kind of embrace the weeds, and I try to learn more about them and understand their life cycle, so I know how to manage them. And if there's something problematic like bindweed, which I have at the other garden, I'm going to manage it a little more intensely. But I would say 95% of the weeds in this garden are actually just really wonderful plants that are in the wrong space at the wrong time.
Gives us a lot to think about, John.
Thanks.
About life, the world, and weeds.
Yeah, that's kind of the approach to farming right now. It is a bigger picture. Everything's intertwined. The way that I approach the farm is the way I'm going to approach life, and I'm trying to mix those together and try and relax a bit and do less work and see what happens. And sometimes it doesn't work, it's a failure, and other times it's great. I remember an amazing morning where I came out a couple weeks ago to weed the gardens, and I was all stressed and it was hot, and I was like, I've got so much work to do. I came out here and stood in the gardens for a little while looking around at what I needed to do, and I just changed my mindset. I was done working, and I just walked back home and I was done. And here we are again. I might be regretting this like later, but I know I have enough food to get through the CSA season in the ground, given that we get a little bit of rain in the near future.
Maybe.
But yeah.
Right. It's like no-till has production method and life.
Yeah, totally. And I do think the no-till is helping. We have really high organic matter here from adding leaves over and over. So that holds moisture for longer. I mean, I wish I could, I mean, all the beds are dry regardless. It's been so long without rain, unless there's irrigation on them. But I could find a spot and we'll pull it away, and the top inch of soil is pure worm casting, because they come up and they take all that leaf mulch and turn it into worm casting. So right now I'm actually scrounging for mulch. I've ran out of my pile. I could drive to the landfill and fill up a pickup truck, but we're just making do as long as we can. And actually some of these weeds that I've left in the ground will act as a mulch. I'll cut it down and throw it on the bed after I plant it.
Hey, Jon, I have a couple of questions coming through the chat that I wanted to toss your way. The first question is, how many CSA members do you support with your gardens?
Yeah, should we walk to the garden while we answer these questions?
Sure.
Straight out and to the left. Right now, I'm doing 30 CSA shares.
That's fantastic. Is that I know it's sort of grown over time. Is that the most you've had? Did you have more last year, fewer?
It's been growing slowly. I think I started with 12 CSA members. And I have a friend with a funny joke with one of my friends, because every year I tell him I'm going to downsize my farm and it gets bigger. But this is the first year that I think I actually downsized, but not by members, but just by I took a month off in the middle of summer. I took mid-July to mid-August off. And so we're just back at it. So it's a 20-week CSA with 30 CSA members. And it's $600 for a share. There's actually a half share option that people can get, and they pick up every other week. But I just count 30 shares to make it easier. It's easier math, and it's essentially the same amount of produce going out the door.
Sure. So is that like, are you packing 30? Are you like, how many of the shares are like half share, like the every other week ones? And like when you pack your CSAs, how many are you packing?
So I have a CSA pickup on Mondays and Thursdays, and people pick up at the house. We don't do deliveries. We did do deliveries to people in the neighborhood last year during COVID. But I don't have a farm vehicle, so we just do on-farm pickup.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, so we pack about 16 shares every week, and about 6 of those are full shares, and 10 of them are half shares every pickup day.
Yep. Okay.
So there's really like probably 50 to 60 CSA members.
Sure. Wow. That's fantastic. And the other question, I think this pertains to the beds that we were just at, but maybe to the ones we're going to as well. What are your bed widths and your path widths?
Yeah, so I set up the beds originally at 4 foot beds, 1 foot paths. But like I was saying before, I only plant on a 30-inch bed top. And so I'd say it's more like a 3 foot bed and a 2 foot path. But anywhere in that range, it's just kind of what you're comfortable with. Sure. If I was to start all over again and I had more space, I'd be curious to have like 3 foot paths and 3 foot beds or something, and try the mowed paths on some of it. But for my system, this works well. But I think if you're using mulch in your paths and you want to rake on and off, having it at least 2 feet is good to be able to store extra mulch in the paths so it's ready when you need it, and it acts as a weed suppressor for the pathways.
It's the big field.
Yeah, this is the biggest garden. To the left, we've got kale, and this is, I would say, one of the successes from the beginning. Kale isn't that hard to grow, but with no-till, it's 2 rows in a bed, 18 inches apart. So even if I have a lot of weed pressure, I can cultivate with shallow cultivation with the diamond hoe, transplant it, mulch it heavy, maybe weed it once. Other than this one, we have been weeding regularly because this whole section has bindweed, but it's really isn't horrible to stay on top of. My dad's helped me with that, and we'll come over here for 5 minutes, get all the bindweed. It's not going away, but it's not causing a problem for the plant. And then here's a newly planted lettuce, transplanted lettuce. And here is a good example. When it's dry, I really hug the drip line. Like if it was spring and we had plenty of moisture, I'd probably plant a little farther. But I just bring everything up to the drip line and make it a little tighter. And this was another situation where, so I do rotations by field, general rotations, where I'd say like where we just were is a greens field. And this would be my miscellaneous crops. We've got kale, eggplants, peppers, okra, ginger, zucchinis, broccoli. So those are like larger space crops. And then I've got a roots crop. But that's what I was doing before. But now I walked around and it was really dry. And I said, what's the easiest bed to plant that's empty? And I won't have to cut down weeds and disturb the bed during this drought. And I had an empty bed here. So I just said, I'll plant the lettuce over here instead. And I did that with radishes and zucchini. All these beds were, this was perennial shallots. And then over there were onions that have radishes.
Have you ever found that you didn't have any bed space available, but you had a crop that needed to go in, like right now?
That's a good question. It's come close, but howdy. Yeah, it's definitely come close, but there hasn't really been a time where I couldn't clear something out and get it planted. But there are sometimes where it's like, oh, I'm gonna have to clear this bed. I was hoping that it would winter kill and I could deal with it next year. And that's kind of a worst case scenario. And that happens every once in a while. And that's part of, not having, it doesn't always work perfectly where you just are like, oh, I got this bed and it's easy. And I rake it off and furrow it. Sometimes I have to go in there and hand weed and it takes a half hour. And then I cultivate, have to come back the next day, and it's a big process. But as long as I'm aware, if I see that ahead of time and plan it, it's not too bad. But that's not a regular basis situation.
Have you found that there are some crops that just do not do well with no-till?
I don't know if it's my no-till system in particular, but there are a few things that are really hard for me to grow. Carrots. I've had some good years on carrots, but I have a germination issue. It's damping off.
Oh, you guys froze on us. Oh, let's see here if we can. Shoot, we lost you. Okay, hang with us, folks, while we get back up and running here. Give us just a second. My tech support had to step away for just a second. So one of the things that I can share is that I know that you can see sort of that ribbon back behind where Jon is. I know that he has, I think that's some deer fencing that he has in there that he had electrified. He had to shut that off while we were preparing. All right, it seems like we dropped Jon and Mark. So I'm probably going to go ahead and wrap things up here. We're almost to the end of our conversation anyway. I'm so bummed that we lost them. But let me just, Jordan, can I have you, or Jorgen, I'm sorry, can I have you go ahead and pop up my slides for me again? And we will go ahead and wrap up here. I'll make sure and get back with Jon and Mark and thank them very much for all of their time. And thank you to them for taking the time to talk with us and to show us around Jon's farm. I think it's really fascinating to see what that space is like and how much he is able to do in that small, like relatively small urban space. 30 CSAs on a little less than a fifth of an acre is really something. Hey,
We're back, sort of.
yeah.
The video phone said overheated and turned itself off.
Oh, sure.
You want to sit down and take over, or Mark can film? Either way.
I'm not going to be still with this.
You want to switch out then?
Yeah.
I can.
All right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead. We're just about to the end here. If you guys have one or two more things that you wanted to say or show, you can go ahead and do that. And maybe we can end the screen sharing, Jorgen, and we can pop back to Mark and Jon for just a sec.
Yeah, you see him now?
You guys are sideways for me. Oop.
Oh, shoot.
Maybe you got to turn the phone.
Yeah. Okay. I get done speaking.
All
your
right.
video-
We lost our video now.
Right. It says,
Okay, well, I think we're going to go ahead. Like I said, we'll just go ahead and wrap things up. We were so close, but I think we've just kind of reached the limits of our of our technology, and that's all right. So that was super fantastic. Like one of our viewers said here, it was really inspirational to see how much Jon is able to accomplish on that amount of small space. And it seems like no-till production has been a big part of what has helped him be really successful and keep things really manageable for him. So thank you very much to Jon Yagla of the Millet Seed, and thanks so much to Mark Quee of Scattergood Friends School Farm. The conversation between you guys is really helpful, and it's really great to watch you walk around and see that. Thanks so much for everybody for attending today. We're gonna have this available on YouTube here in the next few days. I'm sure we have this all recorded. You can go ahead, and if you haven't already registered for the web series on the website, you can do that. And at practicalfarmers.org, just search for the Reduced Tillage Vegetable Web Series, and you can get a reminder about next week's fourth and final installation. We'll be working with, the plan is to work with Emily Fagan and Hannah Breckville from Humble Hands Harvest, as well as Jordan Scheibel from Middle Way Farm. And we'll hear about how they've been conducting their no-till trials and how that has worked for them. So I'm very excited to hear from both of those farmers. And our last slide with our sponsors. Thanks so much to everybody who's been involved in our no-till series, and thanks so much to everybody who's attending today. All right, everybody, you have a great week.